for you, is it enough to have the film play in festivals and briefly in theaters and then be available on VOD? Who is the audience? Who are you trying to reach, and how are you making it? Because as you said, it is a business, economically sustainable.
Right. So that being said, Child of God is a story about a guy who's isolated in the woods and is so lonely he figures out that necrophilia is the way to go for him to kind of find companionship. And
you must have had every studio in town.
Well, it's funny, the book has some history. I think at one point Sean Penn was going to direct it. A young Sean Penn had optioned it, and what's her name? Who did Ratcatcher?
Lynn Ramsey.
Yeah, Lynn Ramsey, I think, wanted to do it at one point. But yes. That being said, I am aware of its non-black blockbuster potential, and so I do a certain kind of balancing in my head or equation in my head where I think, okay, I don't want to make this if I make this for too much, if I make it for a lot of money, what will I get? I mean, I guess I'll get more sets, I'll get, I don't know, maybe I could pay a big star or something to do it, which I don't really need, and I didn't really need more sets because I look at it and I think, no, it's a guy out in the woods for most of it, and he's living in a cabin. We can build a cabin, and so I think if we make it for a responsible price, we can make the movie that we want to make, and we can have a chance at making back the money so we can make another one. And so in that sense, we're doing it for the art. We're doing it to capture it in the truest way possible. And so I do look at the setting. It's like one of my favorite movies this year at Sundance was The Witch. And it's the set isn't that much different than Child of God. It's a very different story, but it's they live in a little house and there's woods. And but he was I spent 5 years researching, and I was well, I mean, if it helped you to make that movie, okay, but it's one cabin, I don't know. But maybe it helped him, gave him some insight that isn't apparent on the surface, but goes into the fabric of the film. I don't know. But for me, it was we can get a period 1950s kind of atmosphere because we're out in the woods for very little money. Same thing with As I Lay Dying. They're going from their house to the city. Most of it's out in the the woods on a trail. So you just need a wagon, and so you can do 19 teens period film for not a ton of money. If it was and even the first film I did, my thesis film at NYU was about the poet Hart Crane. Again, not blockbuster material. Not only is it about a poet, it's a very difficult, kind of opaque, obscure poet who lived a very depressing life. And we're gonna put tons of the poetry in the movie. And but that was New York, Cuba, Mexico, Paris in the 20s, and we did it for less than $500,000, where we just kind of strategically set up our shots around New York. There's plenty of buildings that are still period accurate if you just look at look at it in the right way. Same with Paris, and Mexico. So there are ways to do it if you're strategic.
Well, I think what you say about The Witch is interesting because you do always have these cases of films where you say, oh, the filmmaker has been trying to make this movie for a dozen years, or someone will come to Sundance with a movie and then they won't come back with their second film for 8 or 9 or 10 years. It happens.
That would drive me crazy, as you can see with all my credits.
Yeah, so I guess
that would drive me crazy.
Is that something that you talk with your students and with other young filmmakers about, it sort of finding solutions and not getting hung up on these things?
Yes, I like to, because one of the things that happened when I was an actor was a couple things. I felt I went to acting school for a long time, longer than I should have, years and years and years, even after I was professional, and I realize now in hindsight, like, part of me was probably very frustrated by the fact that I really trained as an actor, but I was still dependent on all these other people to work, to really ply my trade. Like, I'd have to get cast in something, or somebody would have to write something that I liked, or even if they did write something I like, I'd have to be lucky enough or whatever, prove myself enough to actually get it. And so one of the things I do I also have my own schools in New York and LA. One of the things I really try to emphasize there is community, finding your people, so that you're not just dependent on the gatekeepers in the insular industry, but you have your people that can make movies, and then and that's very much what this movie is a result of, and really just go and do it, and kind of you can pursue traditional inroads to the industry, but at the same time you can still be making your own things, because you either know how to do it all, like you're a Seth Rogen who can write and act and direct, or you have your group and you work with them. And I think those are really good models that I didn't quite have when I started out. And I like to, so in that sense, I like to be the person that shows them, like, no, you can do this. You don't have to, like, the most boring part of filmmaking to me is, like, knocking on doors, trying to pitch ideas to people. Like, isn't it so much more fun to just go out and make it and then show people and they get excited about it? Like, and instead of, like, saying, like, well, I've got this good idea, and it's going to be in the execution, you don't quite understand it now. Like, wouldn't it be better to execute it and then show them, and then, like, oh, that's what you meant? So that's how I really teach. That's how I run my graduate classes. All those classes are production based, and by the end, every year each class has a movie.
Talking about models, were there certain filmmakers of the past that you sort of looked to, who inspired you in terms of the way that they work? Because obviously I think I wouldn't be the first one to make the comparison to John Cassavetes in terms of somebody who was working in the mainstream industrial Hollywood system to fund his independent projects, much as you were talking about doing Spider-Man movies so that you can do these other movies. And obviously somebody that you've worked with, Judd Apatow, has been a real impresario in terms of supporting young filmmakers and bringing people up through the business.
Yeah, I mean, those are two great models, and Cassavetes is somebody I always think about, like, when I'm, like, think about, I just made Child of God, and it was like, and it, got really good reviews, and for what it was, I think did as pretty well, as well as expected. And you look at Cassavetes, and it's like, yeah, like, if he only had his acting career, yeah, cool. He's in Rosemary's Baby, and what is it, Magnificent Seven, or no, the Dirty Dozen, and it's like, okay, you'd think, all right, kind of cool career, but, like, then you think about the movies that he directed, and you're like, oh my God, like, so I always think about that. Like, he always is an inspiration, just to kind of continue to kind of find a way to continue to make the personal films, to make the films that I want to make, like that. There's no better model than that. And Apatow is great because he's really good about spotting young talent and finding outlets for them. But that's more of the studio model. Even though he's finding new talent, he's putting, all that stuff is still kind of pushed through the studio. And so, as a filmmaker, I'm not as familiar with that. I'm still kind of the Cassavetes, like, just get it done one way or another kind of guy. That being said, I'm gonna try the studio model now. Seth Rogen, who, has been really good about doing the movies that he wants to make through the studio. And so he's producing a movie that I'm going to direct about the making of the cult movie The Room,
Right.
called The Disaster Artist. So
I reviewed The Room.
Yeah.
For Variety back in the day.
So I'm going to try that, kind of studio model with that. And what happens is, it takes longer. It's like we hired writers. We hired the guys that wrote Spectacular Now and 500 Days of Summer. But I kind of have to sit back and wait for them to do their thing. They're very fast, but we just have to find a spot for them to write, and then it's slower when you do it that way.